Hello everybody, Salamastarba. Welcome to our regular session with Pamela. Pamela is going to talk about creating effective assessments. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you. Hi,
So
everyone.
we are a little bit late.
No.
Okay, we can start.
Okay.
You can share your screen.
Yes, I'm starting to share. Can everyone see my screen
Yes,
now? Okay.
yes.
Okay. Great. So we're going to start talking about, creating effective assessments. Assessments, evaluation and tests, quizzes, all of these kinds of things that we use to find out where our students are at any particular moment in time in their studies. So first, let's talk about what are the purpose of tests, and then what are the different types of tests to address those purposes. So the purpose, why assess? So we need clear objectives for our class. We need to know how to create an effective class appropriate for the level of the students and relevant to their needs as language learners and users. So this is first off, like the diagnostic, like when they come in, where are they, what level are they, and so what do we need to address to help them get to their stated goals. So the quote that we used for this is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So we want to be able to check where we are so that we need to know how to get where we want to be. And then also to check what they have learned. So this can serve as an assessment of your performance as a teacher. So it can be in the middle of the class or at the end of the class. So basically 2 reasons to find out how to meet their needs, and then to find out how you're doing in order to meet their needs. So what do these different terms mean? So assessment. An assessment is formal and it's external. So it means that it's something that is written up ahead of time. It's standardized. It is for, it's when the students know they are taking a test. And external means it's from outside. It's from like a standardized test from the Ministry of Education or from IELTS or TOEFL or any of these entities that are giving tests, that they have a certain standard that they are testing everybody on the same level. An evaluation can be formal or informal. So this can take a lot of different aspects into account. So it can be like, you assess yourself, you evaluate yourself. You can say, I think I'm better at this than this, or I noticed that I was able to answer more questions in this way than this way. And that can be internal. It can be from just from the school. And it can be just from you as a student. It can be you as a teacher. So when we give formal observations, the first thing that we ask after we have observed you is for a self-evaluation, and that is, how do you think the class went? So whenever I've been evaluated or whenever I've observed someone else, that's the first question that is either asked of me or that I ask someone else, is what can you say before I start to give my feedback, or before the person assessing me gives their feedback. And so this can be either self-reflection on something as small as one exercise in class. It can be the whole lesson. It can be the class that you're teaching. It can be an entire semester. It can be an entire year. It just depends on what you are looking to measure and judge at that point. So there's different types of tests. And what do they mean? So diagnostic is one kind, formative is a different kind, and summative is a different kind. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with these. If we were in person right now, we would have a brainstorm and discussion section right now, but I'll just go ahead and give you the answers now. But diagnostic is at the beginning. So this is to identify proper objectives and then create a syllabus catering to those needs. So if you have students come in and you don't know what level they are and you need to find out the level they are and or find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, they're already in your class. Then you say, oh, we're definitely going to work a lot on reading and writing, or we're definitely going to work a lot on listening, or we're definitely going to work a lot on speaking, depending on how well they do in those areas. It can also be a placement test to put students into the proper level of class. I know most of us are working with public high schools, elementary schools, and universities. And so the students that come in are already in the level that they're in your class. But at certain private institutions, they will test students to place them into a level. And also in testing prep, stuff like that. So it could be a placement test to find out what class they need to go into, which is a different form of diagnostic. So this is about finding out what the student needs are so that we can address them. So formative or continuous assessment. So what does this mean? Why do we do it and how do we do it? Again, if we were all together and in a workshop setting, we would be discussing this. We can have Q&A after this. So a formative test means it's part of the formation of the class and of the test. So this is during the semester or during some classes go for 6 weeks. So it's however long the semester or quarter or 6-week session or 4-week session or whatever it is. It's to test how things are going, give the teacher information on what has been mastered, what you don't need to review so much, and what needs to be reviewed. So what is a little bit more not clear for the students or it hasn't been mastered as much. It gets the students accustomed to the experience of taking tests and the test format. This is really important as well. You want to test the students along the way so that they know what the testing format looks like. So you never want to give the student a test at the end of the semester or the end of the year or the end of a session, and it's the first time that they see multiple choice or fill in the blank or short answer. You don't want to have that be a new concept to them. You don't want to be testing them on format. You want to be testing them on content, on what the answer is. So the more that you have gap fills, multiple choice, short answer, matching, fill in the blank different than gap fill. So sometimes they have the A, B, C, D, E, F, and then they have like the blank in the middle of a sentence and they give the answer. And then sometimes it's just, you have to fill in the answer yourself. So you never want any of those formats to be brand new to the students when they're taking a test. So giving smaller tests gets them used to the process of taking tests so that at the end, it's just like, oh, there's another test that we're doing. We've been doing these tests the entire semester. We've been doing these exercises. This is just another one that we're doing, rather than surprising them with, oh, I don't know what they want me to do in this fill in the blank or whatever, in addition to testing my English language ability. Summative tests is at the end of a session, the end of a semester, the end of a year, the end of a test preparation course, could even be the end of a week, depending on how the course is set up. But this is assessing what has been learned at the end of a given amount of time. So yes, could be a midterm, a final, end of the week. So when I was taking Chinese language in my first year of university, we would have summative tests at the end of the week every week. So these were not formative tests. These were summative tests. This was not to give the teacher information on what needed to be covered. This was how much did you master during the week that we have given you this information, and then that goes into your grade immediately. And then, of course, you had a formative test at the end. Like, you could take that information on how well you did on different tests, but a summative test is really testing at the end of a particular time period. What have you mastered at this point? What do you know? What are you confident in as far as what has been taught? So what are the most important aspects of making a test? I know sometimes we will be required to make our own tests, because sometimes, especially I hope after this session, you will start looking at the tests you've been given, or realize that maybe some of the tests that you created in the past, like, maybe need to have some new things addressed. We might need to make brand new ones. Also, maybe there were perfectly good tests given in some of our curriculum books, but they're old now and they need to be updated. And we need to update those regularly. So reliability and validity. So reliability, how do we guarantee that a test is reliable? By the rubrics. So a rubric is a base that we understand what should be covered by the test. So rubrics make sure all markers have a clear understanding of what value of points to provide for each task. So I'll give a solid example of this a little later on. Circumstances. So for example, you don't want to give one class a test at Sunday morning at 6 a.m. They have to come to the school on a day off, and it's very early, and have everybody come in at once, and there's a very crowded classroom, and it's very noisy, and also there's construction going on. And then another class is Wednesday at noon, and there are 10 people in the class, and it's very quiet. So you try to create a good environment for the class that everybody is going to have pretty much the same circumstance, the same situation or environment that won't affect their performance. You don't want it to be that a whole group of students was woken up very early in the morning and they didn't have enough sleep, and then another class is very well rested and had a good breakfast, and that's why they're performing better. Right? So there's only so much we can control for that, but we try to control as much as we can. Uniformity. So all students are tested on the same thing. So we want different questions on an oral test assessing the same language point. So we don't want some getting the simple present and some getting the past perfect and some getting the future perfect. We want everybody to have the same grammar points tested on, but different questions, so that they can't just ask another student when they're leaving class and then memorize something and then repeat it. So what did you do last weekend is a good question to have during an oral assessment. And what did you do last JILO is also a good one. They answer the same, they provoke the same answers to the same grammatical question, but you also don't have the issue of a student telling somebody else they're going to ask this, and so this is what you should memorize and say, because we don't want to deal with memorization. So make sure that they're all different kinds of questions, but they're asking the same kinds of things. So you want, if you're going to ask this level about simple past, simple future, and desires and wishes, conditionals, then make sure that all your questions address those kinds of things. And that we don't want some questions to rely on recall of information more than language use and application. So make sure that it's not that something that was in the text is like something about history or something about what some character in the book was talking about. We don't care about, we're not teaching a history course. We're not teaching anything that has to do with memorizing facts and information. We're looking at using language as a tool of communication. So we don't really care about facts and figures as if it were a history course. So it's more important to focus on how they are expressing, through correct grammar, pronunciation, richness of vocabulary, how much they're understanding you and having a natural conversation using natural speech. Do they understand you? How many times you had to repeat yourself in asking the questions? That's more important than any particular information that might be in the book that's not really important that they memorize or know. And sometimes English language books are not really that up to date on history and information. So it's not that important that they memorize that or know that. It's more important that they know how to use the language and how to express themselves. Quantity. So the more input you have, the better and more accurately you can assess your learners. I know this is a difficult one. We want to have our tests be easy to grade and easy to give. But it's better to, the best situation is that you have a reading test, a listening test, a writing test, and a speaking test. Speaking test can be the longest one. Because you have to see each student, one by one or two by two. 2 by 2 is good because they can interact with each other and you can see that, that interaction and assess that. And then you can just give, 20 to 30 minutes of class time and say, okay, this is your writing exercise. Also listening and, reading can be, reading comprehension. So it does take a little bit of time to get as much as you want out of the students as far as getting a reliable test answers. But that's the best to get an overall. And when you look at the class and you see that, oh, the class is really overperforming in reading comprehension, they're really underperforming in speaking ability. That's information that you need. So it's really worth it to be able to do that. It takes about a week or two, honestly. At the beginning, if you're going to do a diagnostic, and at the end, you're doing a summative final exams, it takes about a week or two each time, but it really is worth it to be able to make your lessons as beneficial and efficient as possible. Constraints. So make your productive tasks specific. So instead of saying, write a 100-word essay, this is very scary to students. And this is very, it's not a great assessment of what they can really do. If you make it very specific, write about your personality in 100 words. What are your best qualities? What do your friends like most about you? What do you do well? So that's really specific. As long as they answer all those questions, you will get a good idea of what their language level is like. You can take that higher level, you can take it to the simple past. What did you do last summer? Who did you go with? What did you do? What did you like about it? What did not you like about it? What didn't you like about it? So yeah, to make it more constrictive and more specific is going to make the students produce more. It's one of those funny contradictions. It's like the more you give them less freedom and they will produce more for you. But yeah, and also with the speaking, never just sit and tell a student like, oh, talk to me in English. Even the strongest student will shut up. They will shut their mouths. If you ask them specific questions, they will talk and they will answer, and you will get a good indication of what their level is. So, validity, how to guarantee a test is valid. Ask the questions, is the test assessing what has been presented in class? So if you look at the test and then you realize, oh, we didn't cover this, we didn't cover this, we didn't cover this, then maybe the test is not so valid, or maybe it's not really important. As I mentioned, if it's more recall of information that was given rather than how to use the language, how to use the grammar, how to use the vocabulary, can you reasonably predict performance from the results? So for example, the best students, will they get the highest score? So if the students that are highest performing in class, getting 5s all the time, getting everything right in their homework assignments, if they can't pass the test, then it's probably not a great test, because it's not really, that's kind of an indication that they're not really testing what has been presented in class. So if they're performing well in class, they should be performing well in the test, because we're working towards the test. Can you describe what you're testing? So it shouldn't be something that is very unclear and, oh, we're testing their command of the English language. No, it should be questions and exercises that are clearly designed to assess their grasp of certain grammatical forms and certain types of vocabulary. Vocabulary related to travel, vocabulary related to home, vocabulary related to the classroom, vocabulary related to medical professions, whatever the test is, business, English, whatever. If you can clearly describe, like, yes, this is the kind of thing that's going to be on the test, then people know what to study for. Also, to focus on a particular note, when you are marking or grading a test, do not take away points for errors or mistakes made in regards to material they're not being tested on. So if there's mistakes in simple past, if they're only expected to know simple present, don't mark them down on that. Don't say, well, this is not a good English speaker, because you are only expecting them to know things based on what you are presenting. It's just on this class itself. Also, vocabulary they're misusing that has not been presented yet. Be very careful for that. Like, again, only what they have been presented in class. Don't assume if somebody is in intermediate English or, advanced beginning, accelerated beginning English, or even high intermediate. I've taken so many different beginning Arabic and, intermediate Arabic classes, and they all cover different things. So it's very, they might not, I might pass one class that is considered lower, that's considered higher than another class, and fail one that's considered lower, just based on what they were presenting in the class. There might be different kinds of vocabulary and different kinds of grammar and different kinds of situations that they create dialogues for. So only test based on what has been presented, not what you think an intermediate English speaker or advanced beginning or beginning advanced or even a high advanced speaker might be. Only test on what you have presented to them. So testing receptive skills. So the pros or the advantages of testing receptive skills. So we know the receptive skills are listening and reading. So it's very easy to grade, right? So if you have something where they are just listening to something and then answering questions based on what they've listened to, or reading a passage and answering something that they've read, the answer is correct. It's A, B, C, or D, or it's a fill in the blank. It's or a short answer, whatever. It's very easy to grade. The answers are objective. And you can just go through and say, oh, this person got A and it was B. They were wrong. Very easy, very quick to grade. The listening exercise will have one right answer. Reading, yes, we'll have one right answer. It can be multiple choice, fill in the blank, open-ended. And it can be adapted to avoid possibility of guessing the correct answer. So if you really want to challenge your students and you don't want them to you think that they're going through multiple choice answering B, 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 and thinking that, well, they will get, at least a quarter correct. You can have it a short answer or open-ended question. But again, it's right or wrong. It's very easy. Like they either know that the person who is going to the train station at 2:00 is Maria, or they don't know that, or that the person who wants the job is Juan, and whatever. They should, if they know it, they know it. So they often score higher on tests that assess receptive skills. And I know everybody here knows this, and I know this as a language learner as well, that it's easier to read and to listen than it is to speak and to write correctly with accuracy. Sure, for sure. Yeah. So to listen to something and understand it is easier than to speak with complete accuracy, like a native speaker, the same kind of thing. And also to read something and understand it, get all the answers right, is much easier than to write with native-like accuracy. So the cons, the disadvantages, are that it's difficult to create these kinds of things. It's more labor intensive for the teacher, and it doesn't assess accuracy with individual language use, right? So we can't just use this by itself and assume that we have all the information about how that student is as a language user of the language. So as I mentioned, because these are easier and it's harder to be accurate in the other two skills, it's not going to give you the information about how they are, how effective they are at using those skills. It also does not accurately replicate an organic English speaking accurate interaction. So they, in reality, for natural speech, you're not going to listen to an audio several times and choose 1 out of 4 possible answers. Whereas in the an oral test, when you are talking with somebody and asking questions, answering questions, this is how we use natural speech. This is natural language. This is dialogue. So this is a little bit more natural as far as the receptive skills are a little bit more artificial. So productive skills, speaking and writing. So again, the advantages are you can't guess, right? So you can't look at A, B, C, D and multiple choice and guess and get C correct. And maybe you knew it and maybe you didn't, but you got it correct. It does replicate the communicative environment and tasks. So this is natural speech. This is how you would talk. So if you went to a cafe in Jalalabad City and you saw me and my friend Katie and we are Americans, and we are talking English to each other, and you decided to introduce yourself and say where you are studying and why you are studying English and who you already know who speaks English, and maybe you know some other Peace Corps volunteers before who worked at the AC. Like, this is natural speech. This is a natural dialogue. So this kind of test that recreates that environment is very reliable in finding out how you would act in that environment, because it is asking normal questions and asking you to respond in real time, listening to the questions that are given and then answering them in real time. So this is testing what we're trying to teach them: speaking and writing effectively in English, communicating with native and non-native speakers. So yes, there are a lot of times where you will have to communicate with non-native speakers. That's probably going to be the majority of the people that you are dealing with, depending on, if you are leaving Kyrgyzstan and going to move to an English-speaking country, then it will be mostly native speakers. But any other job, it will be mostly non-native. I taught some workshops at private schools in Jalalabad city, and a lot of the teachers were from completely different countries that were, from African countries and different countries in Turkey and other places. Well, Turkey, I know you would understand Kyrgyz, but they, if you're having, professional development workshops, and you are trying to talk to them about their job and about concerns with the students, you are talking with other people whose first language is not English. Your first language is not English, but everybody has to effectively communicate with one another, and so you have to have you have to have that communicative ability, not just to instruct the students in rules of grammar, but in order to effectively communicate in the language with one another, with non-native speakers, in order to do your job correctly. Students can't cheat in this also. So if you are sitting a student down and having them talk to you one-on-one as a teacher, so there should be 2 teachers there and 2 students, and you prompt one student to ask another student a question and have a dialogue, there's no way that they can cheat. They either know how to say what they want to say, or they don't know what they are supposed to say. And they either understand what the other student is saying and can respond, or they don't, right? So there's no way to really cheat. Also, if they're writing, you make sure that when they're having their writing test, that somebody is in the classroom watching very carefully, that the students are just looking at their own paper, writing down what they can, they're not looking at a phone, they're not looking at books, they're not looking at other papers. It's very easy if you have 1 or 2 teachers in the classroom doing this. And the tests are easy to create. So it's simple questions and prompts. So it's a lot easier than the receptive skills, where you have to have a lot of questions and a lot of multiple choice and fill in the blank and gap fill and short answer and listening, addressing certain listening questions and then playing the audio a couple times. It's very easy to create. You just have a couple questions that you have to ask them, and then 1 question as a prompt for the writing per each level. So level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or university will be the same level questions. So the cons can be subjective. So this means that one teacher might give a different grade to one student than another, even though they have the same ability. So graders have to be trained to be consistent and to provide this kind of training for an entire department is costly and timely. So this takes like really good training. So when I got this training, we had to take some practice tests to look at them and give a sample grade to them. And so not everybody gave the same grade. And so we had to take some extra time and have the students, the teachers really understand how we are supposed to grade each test based on the rubric. And the tests are timely. So for 10 to 15 minutes per pair of students for oral tests. So this takes a little bit of time. And so you really have to have something for the rest of the students in the class to do, some place for them to be, while the main two teachers are giving the test. So there should be one teacher to give the test, to ask the questions for oral tests, and then another teacher to grade. So you shouldn't have the teacher that is asking the question be the same teacher that is grading, because it's just too much work. You're not giving the same amount of energy to both of those. For written tests, they have to be graded individually, and you have to really pay attention and look and pay attention to the rubric and really make sure it's fair. The graders also have to have a very high level of English in order to accurately mark this. So I know that it's great that there's a lot of different levels of English that are teaching, and we want to spread as much English as possible everywhere we are, but maybe there's not the amount of teachers that are really super fluent in the language. So this can be a little harder for productive skills because you need really, really fluent native level to grade them properly. So to give the kind of feedback for an oral test, make sure that they're not making any mistakes in speaking or any mistakes in writing. This takes like a very high level of speaking and writing, which is like almost, native level. So that's another disadvantage of trying to implement this into like a larger test format. So how do we do production skills? So provide a prompt that will encourage the target language you want to hear from the students. So for example, simple past, you ask, what did you do last summer? Instead of make a sentence using the simple past. So we don't speak like this in our first language. We don't say, talk to me in the simple past. We ask a question that is naturally going to use the simple past. So for example, like I didn't even know what the simple past was until I was 26 years old and getting my degree in teaching English as a foreign language. So we're focusing on use versus usage. So use is how the language is used in natural speech in international communication. Usage is the, quote, correct way or the memorization of rules. So we want to encourage natural speech. We don't want to encourage memorization of how the rules are made, because you can be, as I said, highly educated native speaker of the language and didn't know what the rules were. I just used it, right? So we want to create that environment as much as we can. Create language as a habit and less on memorizing and repeating the rules of the language. So many fluent speakers don't know the names of the rules. They just use them as a matter of habit. For example, they'll say, well, it sounds right. This is why it can be very frustrating when you go to when I've gone to a different country or when other people have had me as a language exchange buddy before I studied how to teach. To not be able to explain why something is used in a way it is with language and just say, well, it just sounds right. This is just the way it is. Well, I need more information than that to be able to be confident in using the language and, communicating effectively. So always being aware of explaining how something is used, but encouraging just using it. So you present how it's used and then practice that usage over and over and over and over again, so that it becomes a habit. It becomes just something that is natural in them, rather than just memorizing what the rule is and then telling you. So the rubrics for writing assessment, you want to have these 6 concepts that you are testing them on. Comprehension, did they understand what the assignment was? Logic, was it logical how their paper was formatted? Did it make sense? There was an introduction, a middle, a presentation of information, an ending. The grammar, how was the grammar overall? If it did not impede comprehension, meaning did it get in the way of you understanding what they were trying to say? If not, then you're good. Spelling, again, was it so difficult that it was impossible to understand what they were trying to communicate to you? Vocabulary, was there enough vocabulary that you felt it was the level that it should be? So were they using a rich enough vocabulary? Were they using the word very over and over and over again? Were they using very simple vocabulary where they need to know more? Usually with foreign language students, their vocabulary and recognition of vocabulary is pretty good. So you should have a pretty high standard for what kind of vocabulary they are using. And then holistic means overall. What kind of a paper was this? So this is like adding all those things together. Do you think it was a 4? Do you think it was a 5? Do you think it was a 3? So all things considered, what kind of a paper was this? And it could be kind of lower on one end and still get a 4, right? So you're giving an overall score. For oral, when you are sitting there speaking to them, fluency. So this is ease in language. This is not how fast they are going. This is not how accurate they are, but are they easily explaining to you what they are trying to say? Are they easily communicating to you? Is it a natural conversation? Even if they're making grammar, pronunciation mistakes, they're stopping once in a while, how natural of a conversation does it feel like? So I can have a conversation with someone and say, oh yeah, they were pretty fluent. Like it was, if I really looked into it, I would say, oh, this is how many grammar mistakes they made. This is how many pronunciation. But overall, the fluency was very, very good. It was a natural conversation. I talked to them. I could, express myself. They could express themselves, make themselves understood. Grammar is a different assessment. So how accurate was their grammar on a scale from 1 to 5? Again, did it impede comprehension? Did it make it difficult for you to understand what they are trying to say? If they are using the simple present and they are meaning to talk about the past and they go back and forth, then that is making it difficult for what they are trying to say. That is impeding comprehension. Vocabulary, again, is it the richness of vocabulary and sophistication that you are expecting at this level? If it is not as much, or if they're misusing it to making it so that it's like, oh, they use this word and they meant a different word. It's very confusing. Pronunciation, does it impede comprehension? Is it to the point where you don't understand what they're trying to say? Is their pronunciation so difficult to understand that it is, you have to ask a few times. Comprehension, did they understand your questions? Did you have to ask several times or try to say it in a different way? Or did they answer a completely different question than you thought? So these are the different rubrics for assessments. And usually you give like a score out of 5 or out of 10 for these and then add them up at the end. I know you work on 5s. I've worked on 5s. That's fine. Holistic score, again, is like everything together. How do you think this person did at their oral assessment? And even if they got low on one, maybe they got high on a bunch of others and they can overall go to a 5 or a 4. Or maybe they're very low on everything and they get a 2 or 3. Okay. So the concept of backwash is teaching to the test. So this is why productive skills are an excellent objective to work towards. You'll be practicing useful productive skills as preparation to speak and write. And also listening and reading will be part of it in order to understand the prompts for these. So that means that you are looking at the end of what you want the students to achieve and then teaching to prepare them for that. So, and a lot of times teaching to the test has become like a very negative concept, but it can actually be really good if what you are preparing them for is beneficial. So if you're preparing them to be able to talk about this and this and this and write about this and this and this, everything's going to be preparing them for something really, really beneficial, really useful for them at the end. So teaching to the test is not really bad. If it's only the receptive skills, then it can be, because it's not going to be very applicable to the real world. But if it's productive, then you're asking them to do a lot. You're asking them to do the work. Then it's going to be a good thing. So let's look at what skills do these kinds of tests actually test. True, false. True, false is comprehension, but it can also be guessing, right? So they have a 50-50 chance of getting it right that, you know, they answered these questions correctly. Multiple choice, they can also guess. Gap fill and matching, there can be a little bit of guessing. It can also, it's a little bit more accurate, but you don't want to have people, you don't want to rely just on these kinds of things, because there can be a lot of guesswork and not a lot of displaying how they got to those conclusions. And we want to keep in mind always language usage versus use. So we don't want to have them memorize the rules of English if they can't use those rules in natural speech. It's more important that they are able to answer questions, have a dialogue, produce natural speech and sentences of their own, spontaneous self-expression in these kinds of formations, then recalling what the rules are of those. They don't even need to know the rules as long as they know how to do it. The breaking down the rules helps them learn it for sure, and that's what we want to do in class. But we don't want to test them on the recall of how the rules are. We want to test them on how to use them. So if we ask a student, tell me the rule of simple past, and you say subject plus verb plus ed plus stated verb, and then you say, okay, what did you do last summer? And then they can't answer you with I swam, with my family, or I went to Issyk-Kul, or I walked around the park, right? I know there's a lot of irregular verbs there, which is also a problem. But if they're not able to use it in actual natural speech, then it's useless for them to memorize the rules, basically. So focus on productive skills, on practicing those productive skills in preparation for testing those productive skills. So yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about here. So tell me the rules for present continuous. Okay, subject plus verb plus to be plus ing. And then the teacher says, what are you doing now? The student can't say, I am taking a test. I am talking to you. I am sitting in a chair. I am studying at my school, right? So memorizing rules is not useful if they cannot be put into practice and applied to natural communication. Yes. So let's look at this kind of an ineffective one. So this is another kind of guessing one. I don't know how many of these the student actually really knows, or how much that they were just guessing. And I don't know if they understand what the rest of the sentence means. Do you like football? So if I ask the student in an oral test, do you like football? And they answered me, I would be able to know immediately whether or not they understood that question, and whether or not they could use the simple present correctly, and maybe even the present continuous. So I could say, do you like football? And the students say, yes, I love football. I practice football every day. I like going to football matches. I play football with my friends. All of that would definitely check out. From just this, I don't know. And the fact that they got 3 right and 3 wrong is like 50%, 50%. I'm not sure that they're really, I'm not confident that they even got 50%, because it looks like guesses to me. So do you like football? Does they live in London? That looks like a guess. And I don't know if the student knows why they got that wrong. Does your parents watch TV in the evening? It's asking the same question over and over again, but not really testing why it was correct or incorrect. So this is, again, another one that maybe they only got these points accidentally. It looks like maybe they didn't understand much at all. My dad drives the newspaper every morning. Okay. I read French and English. Yeah, that's technically correct, but I know the answer they were looking for was speak, because that's more common that somebody would say, I speak French and English rather than I read. Usually it would be I read in French and English. But even then, that's it's not really common that people would say that kind of thing unless they were talking to other linguist colleagues. We teach in a small house. This shows that the student really kind of didn't understand. You work to work, she speak English at my school. I see that they're associating the verb speak with English, but the grammar is not there. They put the speak there. So also the problem is that they were asked to change the part of speech as well as identify the verb, and that wasn't clear. So it just says complete the sentences with verbs in the box, but it doesn't let you know that some of the verbs need to be changed. So she teaches English should be the correct one, but they didn't let you know that you needed to change something at the end of the verb. So you would have to add es, teaches, whereas you drive to work, you don't need to add anything there. So they really should indicate that. And also this was for fifth form, and that was way too young to be giving this kind of an assignment, and also to be expecting this level of English and grammar. At this point, we're supposed to be using games and, exposing them to English and having them communicate and express themselves. We shouldn't be giving this kind of assessment to 5 and 6. Another one, they got 2, but I don't even know if that was a guess. I mean, it was the same thing as the before. And also, what do these have to do with one another? They're so disjointed. It was even difficult for me to try to figure out what they are looking for here. So making sure that you are looking at the tests as the purpose. Does the test serve the student rather than the student serving the test? We want to make sure that the students are the ones that are being served by what we are presenting to them, rather than, oh, well, we have to give this, and so we're going to make sure that, we're going to punish the students or praise them based on what they are given. I really want to get to question and answer. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but these are some of the extra things. Don't give an answer to a later question. So if you make sure that every question that you give is new, and no yes, no, and oral tests. Don't mark down several times for the same mistake. So if the same word is misspelled several times, don't give, 5 marks down. And don't interact too much with oral tests. So you can repeat the question or you can rephrase it, but don't prompt, don't translate, don't lead in anything. Yeah. Okay. So I know this was a little bit of a longer one, so I wanted to get to some questions. Yeah. So hi.
Thank you very much, Pamela.
So I'm good. I think I covered a lot of things. Yeah. But do you have questions, Mama?
Mm-hmm. I haven't got any questions here, but I have questions. In the beginning of your presentation about summative tests, yeah?
Yeah.
And the teachers can take this test at the end of the week. Do you think this kind of tests motivate students? Because I think it's difficult to take every week.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I mean, I look back and I don't think it was that beneficial, honestly. It was one way that the teacher was presenting it, but I didn't like it. Yeah. Because I felt like if I didn't get everything that week, I was a failure, and that was going into my final grade no matter what I did. And all I could do was get that information and help me study for the final and make my final better. But I would definitely, I would advise against doing things like that. Yeah. I would make it like a midterm or smaller, like ungraded tests. Mm-hmm. Like if you do something at the end of the week, but you don't have it graded, and you just have it be for the students' information, that's great. And that also helps a lot because it takes away the stress. And they learn to start taking tests in a stress-free environment. Mm-hmm. And then they can just get the information from you that, you need to improve on this, we asked you this and you didn't know, or, but without having it go into your final grade. I think that, that's a really good point. I'm not a fan of adding summative tests into the final grade.
Okay, like taking tests on like 4 skills, like speaking, reading, listening, writing is difficult in one time.
Yeah.
Most teachers take like paper-based tests, like grammar tests, vocabulary tests,
Yeah.
like
So another thing you can do is the formal tests at the beginning. You can take paper-based, and you can do just the receptive skills and multiple choice, fill in the blank. But you can do informal testing of paying attention to what your students are saying in class as you're doing activities, and have that be part of your assessment of how they're doing and what they need help with. So it can be a continuous assessment, means that you're not having it at this point in time and then 4 weeks from now and then 6 weeks and then the final test, but it's every single time you see the student, you're taking a little bit of notes. It's like when I was teaching at the gymnasium, and you had every day 1 through 5, right? That's a summative test. How are you doing today? Right? But make it very purposeful. Make it really what specifically are you looking at that day that you are grading on, and giving the students information on that, or giving yourself information on what they need help with. Yeah, but that's a good point. It's very time consuming for sure. Okay.
Pamela?
Yeah?
Last question, I'm sorry.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So, like it is very difficult to prepare, to develop tests on reading materials, on
Yeah.
texts. Like you should work on vocabulary. What do you suggest to prepare tests
Yeah.
as
So
an evaluation?
as long as you're having regular classes that focus on the 4 skills. So you regularly have classes that do listening skills, speaking skills, reading skills, and writing skills. They should be prepared enough that if you're going to have part of a test be a reading skill and comprehension, that they'll be used to what that looks like. So make sure that all of your tests are look like the previous exercises you've had in class. So you're going to have classes that you have a passage that you read and you answer certain questions, and then you discuss, and then maybe you have a productive skill where you have like discussion or a writing assignment, right? So we always want to have productive skills be the majority of the class, even if the class is based on a different receptive skill. So just make sure that it's some, like as I mentioned before, make sure that none of the format of the test is new when the test is being presented. Make sure that all of those exercises and those formats are already familiar to the students based on what they've already done.
Okay, thank you very much, Pamela. It was very interesting and useful. I think teachers can find time and to review your presentation on our
Yeah,
Facebook
I know this is a
page.
longer one for sure.
Yeah. Dear teachers and the students, thank you very much for your participation. I hope we'll meet next week. Pamela, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
See you next week. Bye.
Dr. Colin is that.
Yaxshi qalingizlar.